Hello, I'm Jim Tolles. I'm a spiritual teacher. As many of you know, I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Welcome to today's free online talk. I'll be talking about how to let go of control. I think it's a important topic to delve into together. We certainly place a lot of value on control. So here we get to pause and really look at it. We start with just kind of the general question of what is control. And then we'll go from there. So for those people who are just signing on, I encourage you to take a few deep breaths, settle into the space. For anyone who's familiar with me, the reason I do this is the more we relax, the more we open up. We open up to our own wisdom. We open up to the energy of the talk and the connection. All sorts of things become more and more accessible to us the more we relax. So I encourage you to take this initial time to take some deep breaths, let your body relax, let your mind calm, and just draw more attention to your breath right now. Just noticing your breathing. And of course, if somebody could just let me know that you can hear me, that would be fantastic. I'm in a new location for this week before being back in my apartment again for the next talk in 2 weeks. So I just want to make sure the Wi-Fi is working okay. And for anyone who is new, you can chat with me and post comments and whatnot in the chat pod on the right-hand side. You have to be logged into Google to do this. Thanks, John. Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate the confirmation. And so John and Glenn here just replied to me. They're logged in so they can talk back and forth. What I do ask is that you direct questions and comments to me. Cross-talk, talking with each other in such a small space means that some people's questions could get lost. So I just want to make sure that we can be clear and directed in our conversation today, and I can not miss any potential questions. Obviously, this is a respectful place, so respectful to me, respectful to others. Everybody's at different places on their spiritual journey. There'll be some questions that you already kind of feel you have answers for yourself, and there'll be others that you don't. And so just be mindful of wherever other people are in their journey and what they're working with. It's all sacred. We're all doing the best we can. Hi, Susan. And before I really get going, this is a free talks that happen every 2 weeks. The next one will be at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. It's always on Wednesdays. And I'll be talking about awakening to action. I think that's a really important topic as well. And it kind of builds on the letting go of control topic that we're having tonight, and the sense of letting go of control to find out what's important to us. And then when we know what that is, on whatever level, whether it's for ourselves personally or taking action in the world around a social cause, then we take action. So it's that inside out, going inwards, then going outwards, that I think is so important. So that will be the next talk, and I'll, of course, announce it on the blog. And they're all free, but if you feel like donating to me, this work is run on donations. So thanks to all of you who have donated, and thanks to anybody who might want to donate tonight. You just go to my blog, spiritualawakeningprocess.com. And on the right-hand side, there's a PayPal button. You click on that. So whether it's $5, $100, $2, $300, your support is much appreciated, much welcome. So let's get going. How to let go of control. Well, letting go of control, I think we have to start, like I said at the very beginning, consider what is control. What do we even mean by that? What are our attempts to do in the world through that control? Because control is an attempt to achieve something, right? We don't exert influence on ourselves to not get what we want, or to get what we don't want, right? So there's this real sense that behind control are a lot of beliefs. And I think that's an interesting thing to explore in ourselves, and it's really important because it will start to illuminate what we're really trying to do when we're trying to control something is we have to find out what the beliefs are, because the beliefs define the control. So a simple belief is we need to have money, right? This is a common one. People struggle with this one. They struggle with the reality of that being a way of making transactions, finding means of survival, as well as the idea of having money and the idea of safety that money often represents. And so even in just what I said, we already can kind of see that there's a deeper belief, a deeper drive for safety that then lends itself to needing to control things, and in this case, to control how much money you make. So you can see how quickly we find some interesting beliefs just by looking behind the glass and looking behind the door. And that really is a big piece of what we do with ourselves, is getting to know what is hiding behind these doors, because our initial beliefs or initial wants are usually hiding a whole bunch of other things. And if we get caught up in, let's say, just trying to make a lot of money, we don't really understand why. I mean, we think we understand why, and you'll ask most people, say, well, I need it to survive, and which is a rather dramatic explanation, because usually most of us aren't dying at that time. Right? But that's kind of how it goes with the ego self, is it thinks very much in those survival needs. And so the closer something gets to being a sort of survival trigger, usually the more we're going to want to control things, including ourselves, to make ourselves feel safe. So I think control, very simply, is an attempt to achieve something. But it's always an attempt to achieve something, whether it's to achieve safety in a variety of different ways. And we can use safety could just be the whole of it, really. That there's a fear behind control that we're going to be hurt in some regard, whether it's not getting social approval, right? And we want to control a situation so people like us. Or we can go to the money thing where we are unable to take care of our means to like have a roof over our head or clothes on our back. But as many of you know, I mean, that control gets out of control quite quickly, which is kind of ironic, because then we start trying to control lots and lots of things, more and more things, even when we're under no particular threat, under no particular duress of any kind. So an example of this would be like some people get very rich, and they have huge mansions and yachts and things like that, but yet they're scared every time the stock market goes down or their stocks go down, right? They can't control that, and that creates a lot of fear. And a lot of people will do a lot of different things that aren't necessarily ethical to try and maintain control. So even as you're sitting here, I would really challenge you to think about what things in your life do you try to control. And just start with that. And then the next step after that will be why. Why do you need to control those things? What does that get you? And it really is important to not be satisfied with your first answers on a lot of these things, because like I said, the money one's a great example to play with, because it is so commonly accepted that, we just need money, so it's all right to really need to want it and to want to control our careers. A lot of people control their minds, right? So an example of this is where, since you think money is so important, you go do a career that will make you lots of money, and you learn to think in those terms. So let's say you go into finance because it looks safe, which wasn't the case during the 2008 recession. You can ask a lot of people who were in the financial industry then, lost their jobs, but that's not the point. The point was there's this image of safety with that, and so that's a way to control your own financial outcome. And so everybody says, this is all well and good. Yes, we want to control all of this stuff so that we can have money. But then a lot of people start to find out that they're not really happy, right? They're not happy thinking in terms of finances and money and these strategies. It's not resonating, doesn't feel true to their hearts. So they get increasingly miserable. And strangely enough, people kind of turn towards control more. They seem to think it's like, well, then I must not be doing something right, so I've got to work harder or do more things or whatever the person's ego self happens to believe. which of course creates more constriction on the person, right? They're not opening up, they're closing down and trying to grab onto more things to get them what they think they want. And so that's why, as you're sitting here, I'm really encouraging everybody who's watching to think about what is it that you really want. What are the means that you use to control yourself, and what are those means attempting to get? Because you're not going to be able to let go of control if you don't understand what you're really trying to do. We can pick on another very common one, which is the need to be attractive. This tends to weigh more heavily on women in Western culture, but I think it weighs pretty heavily on men these days too. I think we're just getting excessively superficial, unfortunately. Hence all the guys who are eating tons of protein whey and working out a ton to lift tons of weight, right? That's an attempt to be attractive on the male side in one particular way, not the only way. So what is that a means towards? Is it a means towards getting validation from others? Is it a means towards being sexually attractive to others, even though how we look has nothing to do with how we would perform sexually, which I think is always one of the funny ironies of what we call sexy. What we call sexy is an image. It has nothing to do with the act of sex. So attraction is also a way to draw in certain types of romantic interests. Right? So you kind of look at the opposite of those things. It's like, well, then the idea is that if you're not attractive, then you won't get a romantic partner. And so there's a fear of not getting that. And then you can question that and say, well, why do you need a romantic partner? Which will fly in the face of most of what society is saying too. And so that's what makes some of these things challenging and makes letting go of control challenging, when you have so much of this other outside reinforcement saying these things are important to you over and over in like a million different ways. We turn on our computers, on the TV, on our phones, and there's all these ads that are offering certain stories to us again and again. Stories like you need to have money and you need to be attractive. And so we really are brainwashed in a lot of different ways around those particular ones. There are plenty of other ways we can talk about control and how it comes up in life. But I think those two big ones are going to be core issues sitting at the bottom of a lot of control issues. Whether it's fashion, whether it's exercise, whether it's just being completely dejected because you feel like you're failing on those two things, that you haven't been able to succeed in your control, but yet you continue to try and fail. And so if we can deal with these core issues, then that starts to knock out the bottom underneath the whole control mechanism. If you no longer believe that you need a romantic partner, or you need to make lots of money to be happy, then the mechanisms for being controlling, whether it was doing a job you don't like, wearing makeup when you don't want to wear it, or wearing clothes you don't want to wear, or working out tons to achieve a body type, like all that stuff starts to break down. And that's a big lesson for any of you who have had a spiritual awakening. Right? It really takes control right away from you. And things start breaking down, and it's like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And this is where a lot of people freak out and have a lot of trouble, usually in the first year, if not 2 or 3 years, is because they're so caught up in this idea that they were in control, and they believe so much in a lot of these other ideas, to have those ideas washed away and have a lot of their ability to choose what they're doing, at least for the short term, taken away from them, really ignites a lot of deep fear. As somebody matures, you start to see, oh, this is actually showing me how to grow in integrity with life, how to flow with life. It's not harming me or hurting me, but that's not our initial response because we're so committed to these ideas. And we're committed to the control that has grown out of those ideas, that's reinforcing and is attempting to succeed in achieving whatever ideas you're thinking you need to achieve. Most people aren't going to have an awakening, go blow them up and, break down these ideas. So when we're on the general conscious path, and the conscious path simply is the path of getting to know ourselves. Somebody can awaken and actually not choose that path. They'll suffer for a while, and then things will probably calm down. But ultimately, we all have to choose that, to choose to become more aware about things, about ourselves, to grow, to become kinder, that type of thing. It's a very human aspect where awakening really is this space of oneness within. And there's this response that seems to happen within people where it starts to move things. Say, oh, that's the truth. So how do I align to that truth? And we don't realize that that's happening when it first strikes. As you grow, you start to understand it better, and then you can actually guide it. And I do want to make a distinction here between control and guidance. So control is trying to decide where the river goes in life, and guidance is paddling your boat in the river. So you acknowledge that there's certain energy, certain flows moving through you that you don't have control over. They're just going to move. And there's a lot of ways we can influence life and things, but the more we can drop into that deeper divine flow within us, the easier it is to know when and how to paddle our little boats. And it helps us to avoid, rocks and trees in the river of life. It doesn't keep us free from pain because that's not how human life is. So I just want you to consider that. I think that's an important thing to consider. You're not going to give up your agency in life. Agency is just that ability to make choices. Although that in and of itself is kind of an interesting thing to explore. I posted a short little blog post about free will. That's more philosophical than I like to get. Philosophy can be kind of fun, but it's kind of like playing around in your head. And I'm more interested in what is the grounded reality. And grounded realities, like how we control things, are very real to all of us. And they have impacts on our lives. And a lot of times, control is going to shut out some of the things you actually do want in your life. So if there's a strong desire towards a particular romantic person or romantic partner, at times trying to control that situation to get what you want is not going to get what you want. It may push the other person away or suffocate them when they're near you because they don't like how you're responding. Or it may, your means of control may be very hands-off, and so it's not engaging enough so the person doesn't think you're interested. So there's all sorts of strange ways where control can keep us from what we actually do want. And it can actually keep us from some of the goals we set out to have in our lives. Not always, but for some people this is very true. Control is very much a narrowing of our perspective. So we lock in on this certain way of living in between my hands, and everything outside of my hands we don't see, we don't want. It's invisible to us. I mean, this is another reason why going through a spiritual shift of any kind, not just awakening is just one of many kinds of shifts people have. Suddenly we see things that were already there, but they look brand new. They were already there. But we didn't see them because they didn't fit these beliefs and what we were trying to control, what we were trying to make happen in our lives. So somebody who's avidly looking for a romantic partner, suddenly, control drops away and they see a new great business partner who they would not have seen because that's not what they thought they wanted. So the more you really pay attention to how and when you're controlling life, the more you can pay attention to what are the beliefs that I'm holding on to, that I'm trying to actualize in my life. And then you can step behind those too. And the stepping back process to the space where we're just watching all this arising inside of us, watching all these ideas come and go is really, really important. Because we're stepping back into that space of witnessing life, witnessing ourselves. And a lot of what's going on in our minds is just made up. And we don't have to act that way or live that way. We actually have a ton more choice. So this process of noticing, of questioning, and of watching are 3 key steps in letting go of control. Because when we're really caught up in control, we're not thinking about where this belief comes from. We're not really watching ourselves for the most part. We're just kind of lost in the action and the grasping for whatever it is you're trying to grasp for. Even if it's mental control, right? Sometimes people get caught up with trying to make our minds think a certain way. And this also happens on the spiritual path, ironically enough. But when we step out of that, the mind can come to peace. So it's not through control. A lot of people get stuck trying to control their minds, trying to stop thoughts, and that's just a miserable process. I usually describe such a more mindful way of doing it is like when you're watching your thoughts, it's like unplugging a fan. The fan has had a lot of energy put into it, so it keeps spinning for a while, right? It just keeps going. But eventually, it starts to wind down. If we start getting involved with those thoughts again, we're plugging the fan back in, we're speeding it back up again, we're putting more energy into it. So control would be like sticking your hands in the fan and trying to stop it from moving, and it's like hitting your hands, and it's really uncomfortable. Don't stick your hand in the fan. And maybe that could be like a nice little metaphor anytime, things are getting too serious for you and you're noticing all the different ways you're trying to control life, or trying to control a conversation, trying to control your dog, trying to control your kids, trying to control your parents. I mean, all these different ways where we're trying to get people to respond to us in certain ways so that we get a certain feeling from that response, from that interaction. And this happens all the time in relationships, not just romantic ones, but any of them. Like people who want to get validated by their boss, or get good feedback from their coworkers, and if they don't get what they want, then they're upset. So there's a lot of ways that control is going to show up in life, and does show up in life. The more you can see it, the more you can make different choices, and you can step back from it and say, oh, I'm trying to control this. Why am I trying to control this? What am I trying to get? Then you look at the different answers and you ask, well, what is this answer really about? And you can step back again, and then you just kind of watch your thoughts come and go. And it will move you towards the space of not knowing, which really drives anybody with a control issue crazy, because that'll expose a certain issue around safety, that we find the unknown unsafe. And so we start to sit there when we don't know what we're going to do, because we're so used to controlling life in different ways. And we're like, what am I going to do? And it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So you have to sit in that space of the unknown. Getting used to the space of the unknown is a very, very powerful tool to let go of control. The more you sit there, the more your vision expands. So think of control as also a very narrow kind of vision. Letting go of control in that space of witnessing is a very broad vision of life. That in and of itself scares a lot of people, because we can be surprised at how big our lives are, how big we are. We're not used to that. I can say you can live your life any way that you want, but that just doesn't register for most people. It's like, how do you choose now? If you can be an ambassador, this is just jobs. You can be an ambassador, you can be a janitor, you can be a CEO, you could be a trail manager, right? Suddenly, you start to look at this just in the realm of jobs and work. You're like, I don't know how to choose that anymore. And I think that really takes us towards a path of humility. And humility is something that I think is lacking in most control. Because control is about, this is what I want, I'm going to get this, and I'm going to make it happen somehow. And humility is really a deeper saying of, I don't know if that's the right way. I'm going to open myself to other possibilities and really trust a deeper divine part of me. And for some people, this sounds like spiritual mumbo jumbo, but, that's also control speaking. And so this is how we box ourselves in with the ego. The thing about being in the space of the witness is you can also choose to go back to your old way of thinking. It doesn't preclude you from doing that. The ego precludes you from doing anything other than your set program. I often describe it as like the old Windows processing systems, right? The operating system just knows what it knows. It operates the way it operates. It's not going to get any better. It's not going to learn any new tricks. But you can choose from an infinite number of metaphorical operating systems, and you can come into using them and come out of them. You can be a very directed and strong person and have clear goals at your nonprofit, for instance, and then you can let that go. control has to stay in certain modes of operation, certain ways of thinking. It really has a lack of control, or a lack of flexibility, I mean. That lack of flexibility isn't really very adaptable. And of course, everyone's different with different levels of adaptability within what they consider acceptable, so long as it's getting them what they want. There's a comment from John. Control is such an intellectual thing as well. It's amazing the way intuition comes in when we open to the unknown and let each moment play out as it will. So many unforeseen blessings. Absolutely. I mean, that's the humility that I'm talking about. So that's a great point, John. Right? It's just like all these unforeseen blessings. They're unforeseen because it doesn't fit our ego process, our way of thinking about life. So we can't see them, even if they're sitting right in front of us. There are great movies, right, around the romantic partner thing, right, where the person has been looking for true love, and the whole time it's this friend who's been right there, right? But that's the nature of control, that the friend didn't fit this person's idea of what romance or romantic partner should look like. But when they open up their eyes and they let go of control, then suddenly, well, voila, here's this thing that they were striving for. But even then, it's such a touchy thing. Because once again, there's that cultural belief that we're all supposed to have romantic partners and such. And maybe not. Maybe that's not right for you. Everybody can live life differently. So even in that example, desire to me is something you have to question. You really have to go into that intuitive place that John's talking about. To really sit with it, like, do I really want a romantic partner? What lifestyle do I really want, in relationship to my relationship with money? Well, that's another one. Because we get so caught up believing we need lots of it, but like, what is your living style preference, right? Some people are very happy, living in places that you don't need a lot of money. You could, I don't know, camp out or live in a log cabin, some way that's particularly low cost. You don't need a ton for that. Obviously, money and happiness do not go hand in hand. So there's a lot of ways that as we question ourselves, that'll help us loosen our grasp on control. Because mainly what we do is we kind of build up this ego self. And the ego is just a bunch of identity traits and experiences and social beliefs and family beliefs that all kind of clump together in this big ball of stuff that we call ourselves. And we're so used to thinking of ourselves as this clumped up ball of stuff that we don't realize we have a choice in how we think and how we believe. And we just automatically live life from this operating system. And about the only time that the control breaks down for a lot of people is spiritual awakening, near-death experience, some sort of trauma, right? Something has to come and shake the cage hard enough for people to say, there's a problem. And then very slowly, most people give up control piece by piece. But even then, you can step into the world of self-improvement. Now you're trying to control yourself towards some other means. So we really have to be mindful about this issue. Anytime you start trying too hard and things are getting really difficult, I encourage you to just take a step back and be like, am I trying to control this situation? Whether you're doing a startup, whether you're trying to get somebody to like you in the dating world, or trying to fix your marriage, or, take a step back. What are you trying to make happen? Right, make it happen is so culturally accepted as a good thing that right now some of you are probably surprised, like, what? It's like, but we don't make things happen. I mean, the word co-create it's kind of a new agey, jargony term, but let's go with it because I think it's more truthful to our reality that we create with others. Co-creation, community creation. We often think about, how we create with the universe, the divine as a whole, right? That's a lot of other forces coming together. And I found that when I listen to that part of me and I drop into the clarity, things kind of move and grow on their own. They work on their own. But if it's just me trying to make something happen, it takes an enormous amount of work and often is falling apart as soon as I'm putting something together. I mean, you can think of it like being just like a farmer, right? You don't make crops grow. I mean, you can plant seeds, you can fertilize, you can weed, you can dig up rocks, you can dig the rows, and those are all important aspects of your co-creation. But if they don't sprout, if the sun doesn't shine, if there's not enough water or rain, you are not going to get much of a crop, right? So that's the reality of co-creation right there in hardcore basic living terms. It could be that the land's not good, right? Has nothing to do with you failing at that point, right? It's just the way the land is. There's a lot of land that's not very arable. So humility is a great doorway towards letting go of control. The more you step back into that space of just allowing and watching, then it becomes a lot clearer about where things are flowing in life. I won't say it becomes crystal clear because we're human beings and we have a lot of different issues. And the earlier you're on your path and your self-work, usually the more cut off you are from your own inner flow, from a lot of clarity. So I can only encourage you towards doing inner work. Inner work are dealing with these very issues I've brought up around cultural beliefs around needing money or being attractive, fears of death, the need for safety. All these different issues really are what drive the show. And so when they're driving the show, we don't have much free will because we're already being told what's important to us rather than really making a decision on our own. And this kind of goes back to the blog post I mentioned that went up today about free will. If I come to you and I say that you can choose between the color yellow and the color blue, am I really giving you a choice? It looks like I'm giving you a choice. But there's like a bazillion other colors outside, not just the ones we can see, but outside what we can see. Right? And so that's an interesting way where our ego selves control what we can even see. And so this is a deeper level of control. So that's why going towards the issues, going towards your core beliefs is really important because they're already controlling you invisibly. So they control what you believe in and what you think is important. And then you try and achieve what you think is important through more control. And even some people are kind of out of control, quote unquote. There are elements of how they're still being controlled by beliefs around, some people will play the out of control, I need help person, so that other people play the savior role with them. And that happens all the time. And that's actually another kind of control. It's all these interesting ways that we try and get the things that we think we want. So we start to surrender all this. We surrender and say, I don't have control, and I don't know myself. And this takes a lot of humility. We want to believe we know ourselves, even though we've been living in these bodies forever, forever, however long you've been living it, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. We want to believe we understand it, but we really don't on so many levels. So surrendering to this space where I don't know me, but I want to get to know me is a really, really important turning inwards. Turning inwards is, just another way to say what I've been talking about tonight of letting go of control, that we start to turn inwards to see, where is this all coming from? Why am I doing this? Why am I behaving this way? Some people will be fortunate, but it won't feel fortunate at the time to see things fail and to realize that they don't have control. But if you can realize it in the way of understanding this idea of co-creation, that we're building things together, and some things you're not building with other people, with the divine. It's just pure ego. You start to realize, well, that form of creating things in life does not work. So I'm going to start to let go of all the ways where I try to create things when it doesn't work. Doesn't mean we quit on things. I'm not talking about a lack of commitment. That's a different set of issues. That usually comes from a lot of avoidance, comes from a whole variety of things. Self-worth is one of which. You don't feel good enough to achieve what you want to achieve, and things like that. So that's a whole other bucket. But as we let go of control, we also can find a simplicity in the moment. And that takes us to what really matters. And things like our own self-love, that really matters. So it's a real changing of perspective. It's a big piece of letting go of control. It's a surrendering of the ideas and the things that we think we want. And that's really powerful. It's very triggering for a lot of people where it's like, oh, I really want this and I can't have it and I'm not going to be okay if I don't have it. And a lot of times as you let go of some things in the spiritual path, you realize, wow, I didn't actually want that. Why was I so intent on this thing, whatever that happens to be? Life just keeps getting simpler and simpler the more you let go and you surrender. And as you do that, it really is a lot easier to see like what actually matters to me and then move from that space. Just say, okay, so I'm going to plant a few of these seeds. Well, you can use this more metaphorically. And see what happens. If I go back to school and I start learning about this thing, that I really want to learn about, let's call it engineering, becoming a mechanical engineer. Starting to explore these things, see what happens. How do you enjoy the material? Do you enjoy the people you're around? There are a lot of different things that you start to discover when you step outside. And maybe you're coming from being a nurse, right? So that can be a very dramatic shift. There's a tendency that we feel extremely vulnerable as we're stepping outside control. That tends to be a good sign in my book. That you're like, okay, so I've let go of control. I'm starting to explore things. I don't know what I'm doing. Right? And that ignites these different safety issues, which are often what we're trying to avoid. A lot of what human beings really are trying to avoid through control is their own upset feelings. There are plenty of physical things in life that we don't want to have happen, but we really don't like our emotions. There's like a small number of emotions that we like, and like the rest we want nothing to do with. And so in letting go of control, that's actually an invitation to all of those emotions. That's another common aspect of a spiritual awakening, that like all these emotions that you were avoiding rush back in, and you're like, ah. So overwhelmed by all this stuff that you're feeling. So in letting go of control, dealing with these beliefs, stepping back to surrender, starting to simplify and notice what's really important to you, then taking action, moving into the space of the unknown. See, when something's really outside your comfort zone, you really don't know how to control it anymore. So that's why it feels so vulnerable, when we're so used to acting a certain way to get what we think we want. And so now it takes that away from you. And that forces you to be more in the present moment, which is a good thing. The more in the present moment you are, the clearer it is what the next step is. Not necessarily what's going to happen in the future. We can certainly plan. This path does not take away any of your abilities to plan or to dream or to take action. It actually gives you more back. Because control, once again, that's a limitation on what you can dream, what you can believe, what you think you can do. So it cuts off so much from you. It cuts you out of your own power. The more you do inner work and open up and you follow this vulnerable path into the unknown, the more powerful you really become. That really is a whole topic for another talk, is how we start to come into power and how we start to understand what real power is. Because most of what people think of as power is just control. It's a means of forcing, a lot of times, other people to give us what we want or to do what we think they should do. And there's gradations of that, of course. So there's an interesting way that initially, as you drop into humility, you feel very powerless. But that, to me, is really just the ego not knowing what real power is and complaining. But you have to know better. You have to know yourself better. And you're going to have to trust the process because you're learning a new way of engaging with life that's much more flexible, much more adaptable. And I don't want to say this gets you what you want because, as I said, a lot of those wants are coming from these old beliefs. And those beliefs have to go. They're in the way. But it certainly tends to open us up to a lot more joy, a lot more compassion, a lot more kindness. Letting go of control also opens up to a lot more fear and anger and shame and all the rest, but we learn how to process those. And being able to be with that pain within ourselves, we can be with more pain than others. And that makes us very powerful people on that score. I know some of you, really appreciate if somebody comes and listens to whatever is happening for you, and they don't judge you. They can just be with you. They don't get upset that you're having something difficult. They just allow you to be as you are. And that feels really good. And we all have this capability, but that's why we have to do our inner work, because in doing our inner work, we don't get triggered by other people's pain. And so we have greater space for them to be messy and to work things out. And when people work things out, then they don't carry pain onwards into life. Most of the time, people haven't worked through any of their pain. So one person gets triggered, and so that means they want to control the situation. Right? This is an aspect of pain. This is another reason why control is such a big problem. So somebody hears some really awful thing about child pornography, and they haven't done their inner work. That's a horrible thing. Right? So this is not a callous thing to be like, not triggered by something. There's confusion around that. Like a lot of people think caring means getting upset, but it's not. You getting upset about child pornography doesn't help the children out. It just doesn't. And so being in that space where you can be with the other person, let them work through it, then that allows them to relax rather than trying to control it and then like say, well, how are we going to fix this situation? Or how am I going to get you to stop being upset in some sort of way? Or how do I say the right thing so you feel better? Right? All that sort of that stuff like that is control, and it's really a reflection of how you've been triggered. It has nothing to do with dealing with the issue of child pornography. If you're called to work on that issue, then by all means, please do. It's a terrible thing to do to children. So on that rather heavy note, if people have some questions, I feel like I've kind of come to a momentary pause. For anyone who's just signed on, you can type your questions in the chat pod on the right-hand side. And I know it is a lot to kind of take in this concept that control is bad and that we do need to let go of it in all circumstances. And it can be kind of a foreign idea to really appreciate a difference between control and guidance. So that guidance is that paddling your boat, seeing what's actually happening in life, not what you think is happening in life, and engaging with that. Right? That leads towards guidance. Where you can say, well, this is what I can do. Right? Here's a major issue going on in my community. I'm clear in myself. This is what I'm going to do. This is my part that I can offer to whatever this issue may be. Where control is getting triggered by it, so you don't want to see the issue or wanting to fix it, or you want to blame someone. Like, people are great at blaming, but it doesn't change anything. Usually it makes things worse. And control does for a lot of that. Makes things worse or exhausts people, right? Because you're spending so much energy trying to get things to go a certain way. I always appreciate Rumi, and one of his lines is around the fact that mystics are the laziest people. And it's not that they can't do things, but they realize that there's not as much to do as we think there is. But in that sort of conserved energy, when we do take action, it's so much more powerful. The way we can guide and shapeshift our lives is incredible. But it doesn't come from control. It doesn't come from trying to force ourselves into an idea, or force our lives, or force our friends and loved ones into ideas. That's not how it is. So what are on people's minds? And if nothing's on your mind, just take a few more deep breaths and relax. Let yourself open to the space. Hi, Patty. She says, I feel I'm stuck. I'm listening to all you were saying. I tend to let go, then take it back, let go, then take it back. And yes, I'm exhausted. Yeah, that is exhausting. You know, how we try and grab on to the old way because we really don't trust ourselves. I think there's a trust and faith that we have to develop, not just in the divine and the greater universe, but in ourselves. That you really can let go of control, but stay engaged. So I think when people think of control, it's like either controlling everything or out of control, right? We can be very polarized in our thinking in this culture, but it's not. That's not the only two options. We just want to know where these things are coming from. And so that's really where I would point you towards, Patty, is to pay more attention to what are your beliefs? What is it you're trying to get in life? Really investigate those. Because otherwise, they're still going to be screaming in the background saying, no, you have to get this thing. And then you'll just go back towards control. Or you will create some other thing. I mean, we can use any word or idea and turn it into control with just, putting new wallpaper on the prison cell. So we can turn the word guidance into control. I'm just giving you another term to consider. So just a way to conceptualize different ways of engaging with life. So that's why you have to keep stepping back to look at the issues around like what it is that you want and where are you trying to go. So you can illuminate the assumptions and the beliefs that would otherwise be happy to just hide out in the background. Like to hide out in the back of your head and pull all the strings. And so a part of you is like, well, I know this isn't working, this controlling thing isn't working, and so you kind of step back, but then this part in your head says, no, but I still have to have this thing, whatever this thing happens to be for you. And so you go back to the old way, in and out. So you got to keep turning that mirror around, Patty. To really, really look into what are these assumptions. Thanks for the comment. What other comments and questions do people have in our last 10 minutes together? And while people are thinking, as I said at the top, if you enjoy these talks or just generally want to support me, you can go to spiritualawakeningprocess.com. There's a PayPal button there where you can donate. But by all means, don't feel obligated. I love doing these things for free. But at the same time, where you put your money is what you create in this world. Anytime you walk by and you see huge buildings, a lot of people put a lot of money, energy there and said that that's important. It's just kind of that simple that way. And thank you to all of you who have donated in the past. That's why I'm here doing this. Well, it's not why I'm here. It's why I'm able to do it and not do another job, which I did for several years, which is a lot of extra work, but totally worth it to get this started and going the way it is. Oh, and for those who don't already know, I was interviewed by Buddha at the Gas Pump. And so they're supposed to have our interview that I did with Rick Archer coming up on the 3rd, I believe. So that'll be just on YouTube, or you can go to their website to watch that. The benefits of letting go of control really are awesome, because you really do start to feel this flow, and the more you feel the flow, the more you know when you're going back towards control. Control really feels like being a fish in dry land. It's like you're kind of flopping around trying to make things happen, and then you roll back into the water, and it's like everything starts to pull you so much more easily. Hi Zoe, it's good to have you again. Do you have any advice for letting go when it comes to heartbreak and moving on? Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a great place, Zoe, to go inside and be like, okay, why is my heart broken? Because your heartbreak is your choice. And this is a big thing I like to emphasize about our emotions. Our emotions are chosen by us. We just choose them so unconsciously and so quickly that we don't realize that we've made a choice. So like any jokes that I might have made tonight where you laughed, a part of you chose to laugh. I didn't make you laugh. There was a whole bunch of things that happened in the back of your head. Or it can be the reverse, where you thought that something I said was exceptionally dumb, and a whole bunch of choices got made in the back to choose to be kind of upset or annoyed at what I was saying. Right? So these emotional choices are all reflections of other issues. And issues like, I need to have a romantic partner, or I shouldn't be alone, or I'm scared of being alone. Right. So those are three really big ones, Zoe, that you can look at for yourself to start to really see, how much is that what you're believing in? Because if you don't believe in those things, then relationships, that come and go. I'm assuming we're talking about relationships. It's just natural. Relationships are always coming in and out of our lives. But the deeper those issues are that we don't look at, on like maybe a fear of being lonely or being on your own, right? That's a very powerful one. It will continue to control. And so when you don't have that relationship, then it tells you that you should be upset. If that issue goes away, then it can't tell you to be upset. And it's just like, oh, well, this relationship has ended and I'll move on. It's not callous. It's not cut off. It's just a deeper understanding that all of life is fluid. And so we do our best to love those who are in our lives when they're here. And then when it's time for them to go or for us to go, then to be at peace with that too. I hope that's helpful. So from Aussie Chick, for me, when I feel like I'm grasping for an outcome or staying in judgment of the situation or myself, I'm lucky when I notice it and then ask myself, what if I let go of this? Yeah, that's a great question. Once again, it's still, there's this question of what is wanting something? Why does it want this outcome? What are you going to get from this outcome? So the ego is always playing in this world of avoidance and acquiring. So it's trying to avoid painful things, whatever happens to be painful, even though, as I said, with the emotional side of things, we choose that pain for the most part. And it's not our fault. Remember that, growing up, we're children, we're unconscious, we're just absorbing all these beliefs. But now I assume that all of us that are sitting here tonight, we want to be spiritual adults. And a spiritual adult understands that this whole idea of ourselves, whoever Zoe is or Jim is or Patty, that's made up. And we can change it at any time that we want. That's very empowering. So that's why, going towards any beliefs, going back to the question from Aussie Chick, going towards any of the beliefs that are hiding in the background, that are part of that grasping, a part of staying in the judgment is so important, because otherwise that grasping and judgment will keep coming back. And so you'll feel like you're working on the same issue, you just haven't gone deep enough to really, really deal with what's going on underneath all that stuff, to deal with some of the core fears. The deeper you go in letting go, you're going to watch some very powerful fears come up out of you. And that's where, as I talk about so often, breathing and relaxing is so important, because we have to teach ourselves that we're not in trouble. Because most of the times when we're letting go and we're doing this sort of inner work, we're under no real issue, under no real threat. And nothing's going to hurt us in that moment, but it feels like it, right? That's because there are those hidden choices based off of those hidden beliefs to say that something hasn't gone the way I wanted it. I should be upset. So we flood our system with all sorts of interesting neurotransmitters and hormones and essentially scare ourselves. I hope that was helpful, Aussie Chick. And you're welcome, Zoe. Thanks for your comments and your questions. I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions from anyone who hasn't had a chance to ask yet before we close for tonight. And as I also said at the beginning, the next free talk will be at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 2 Wednesdays from now. It's going to be about awakening to action. So taking action from a conscious place. Hi, Natasha. Okay, so one of my big issues is my body. I've been trying different dietary changes, but it feels controlling. I'm not sure they're working. It's scary to let go of this. Yeah, body is powerful work, Natasha. There's no way that I can overemphasize that. We are so deeply identified with our bodies and how we feel. So if there's a place that we try and control very quickly if something isn't going well, it's our body. So letting go of control, though, as I said earlier, still means we're engaged. Letting go of control means letting go of our idea of how the solution should look, what the outcome should be. Some people who lose limbs from war and things like that, they have to learn to let go of the idea of how their body should be and adapt to a new way of living. So that forces engagement, but that's not necessarily an easy path, right? A lot of people get stuck in a grieving process where they can't come to terms to the reality that, 1, they don't have control of their body. 2, their body is now completely different. And they're separate things, because none of us actually has control of our bodies. If I have a nervous system problem, I can't do this stuff with my hands I'm doing right now. I think I control my hands, but I actually don't. So that's a very powerful thing to realize, that we really don't have control of the body. It's like cancer is a big reminder to everybody. Anybody who gets cancer, it's like your body is attacking itself. It's like, did you do this to yourself? No. But this is something that's happening within your body because we don't have control. We can only guide it and engage with it as best we can. So, lots of love to you, Natasha. It is scary to let go. But of course, stay engaged, and continue to explore what your body needs in those dietary changes, and to be gentle. Where we can also get into more and more control. I know there's at least one other person who's going to really empathize with what I'm about to say, is when we overreact to body issues and we do too much. We change our diet too much, we get too extreme in our diet, and then we can actually create more problems, right? And that's through control. Control is creating more problems because we're overreacting, trying to fix something rather than staying engaged but probably uncomfortable with whatever is arising inside. So let me know if that was helpful, Natasha. Hi, Kyle. Who is it that is choosing the emotions, and what dictates which emotions we choose? Clearly this question shows that it must be a highly unconscious process, for me at least. Well, it is for most of us. And especially with, like I was mentioning, the social beliefs. Right? When society keeps bouncing back at us, this is important, this is important, this is important, over and over again, we just believe it. So if you tell somebody for their whole life that having big muscles as a guy is important, he's probably going to believe it for the most part. Right? And then, of course, there's a deeper need to be approved by society, need for validation, need for love, right? Those things are hidden underneath. And so if we don't feel like we're succeeding in that, then those unconscious beliefs then decide that we should feel bad about ourselves. And then people feel bad, and then they try to control more. Or some people go, like I said, the opposite direction, go out of control. So they'll just eat whatever, just give up on the body entirely, which of course is not healthy. And then they tend to feel worse about themselves, and you eat more, you get into drugs, and all these different ways we start self-medicating. So I just can't emphasize the importance of going within. And this isn't a control either, right? Because control kind of has this idea that we know what we're going to get. On the spiritual path, we don't know what we're going to get. We have senses, and most of my experience is that we do become more loving, more kind, more open, more peaceful people, more adaptable, more flexible. That's been my experience. But we don't really understand our own path. We have to trust our own path. And I know many of you hear me say this a lot, or it's like, well, I don't really know what's right for you. I'm just offering you tools so you can go in and understand yourselves. Right? And that happens through staying engaged and learning about yourself. And in that way, you're guiding your own process, but the process is also showing you. And so that's naturally a beautiful co-creation. And so in that way, we don't control our inner work, but we are very much engaged, because if we aren't engaged actively with it, we're going to tend to stay in these old patterns, whatever they may be, and can tend to try and control ourselves and others in the ways that we already have and always have. And Tasha says, I can definitely identify with overacting and making it worse. Thanks for the insight. You're welcome. Thanks for the question, Natasha and Kyle. Thanks for everybody's questions and comments. I think we're coming to an end. As always, it's a pleasure and honor to get to serve you, and I look forward to having our next online talk in 2 weeks. Until then, have a beautiful rest of your night or morning, wherever you may be. Take care, everybody.